When I set out on my Goodyear career in 1979, it wasn't part of my grand plan to someday have my name be on a Supreme Court case or an act of Congress. I simply wanted to work hard and support my family. The rest, I believed, would take care of itself. That's the way it should work, right? But in my case, it did not work that way because I did work hard, and I did work to support my family. And I gave that company a lot of good years, but they did not live up to their end of the bargain. I went to Goodyear in 1979 because they had built the radial tire division. Prior to that, I was a district manager for H&R Block, and prior to that, I was assistant financial aid director at Jacksonville State University. I had had a long working career and a good track record. There were also 6 years in there that I actually worked two full-time jobs to help support my family. So when I talk about these women who are working all these hours and these jobs, I know exactly what they're going through. But Goodyear built that radial plant, and I knew radial tires was way of the future. Big spread in the business magazine stated how they were going to implement women and minorities in management roles. I started interviewing and was hired in 1979. I worked there 19 years, went into work one evening, and looked in my mail at work. There was this note, my name and 3 men. The pay was so drastically different. I knew it was correct because mine was to the dollar. When I saw that note, I was devastated, humiliated. I did not know how I could get through a 12-hour shift that night because I had no idea who had given me that note. I did not know where it came from. And the first thought I had when I saw it, my mind started calculating overtime pay, because Goodyear Tire and Rubber paid their first line managers, area managers overtime, because if we did not get overtime, we would be short. We would even make less than our union men and women. But when I saw that note, I finally mustered up enough courage and went out on the floor to pursue my shift that evening. I thought about it all night, but about halfway through that 12-hour shift, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My retirement is based on what I'm earning. My contributory retirement was based on what I was earning, matched by a percentage from the company. My 401k was 10% of my salary, matched by 6% stock from Goodyear, and someday Social Security will also be based on that. That's when I really felt sick. I drove home the next morning and told my husband what I had learned. I said, I have to file a charge with the Equal Employment Commission in Birmingham, Alabama, unless you object. I can tell you up front, if I start this, we will be in it at least 8 years. He said, what time do you want to leave? They did an investigation, and in about 9 months, the investigator called. He said, you've got one of the best cases we've ever seen, but you probably need to get your own attorney. You'll get to trial faster. I found a young attorney with a large firm in Birmingham. He took my case on a contingent basis, which meant his firm would have gotten half for what I got. But he took my case, and we still did not get to federal trial until January of 2003. After a week of testimony and all of the evidence that was presented at trial, and I had 2 very courageous women who testified on my behalf. At trial, the other side asked her why she never complained. She said, I was a single mother supporting a handicapped son. I knew if I brought up my pay, I wouldn't have a job, and I lived paycheck to paycheck. You see, Goodyear Tire and Rubber told us when we hired in, you never discuss your pay or you will not have a job. Everything is a top secret, so no one ever discussed their pay. When the cost of living increased the top and the mid and the bottom, they never posted it. There was no law that required them to. Where I look back and see how I shortchanged myself, I thought these people were an equal employment employer, and they had government contracts. We were filling government contracts from the day I walked in to the day I walked out the door. In fact, when I walked in, we were making airplane tires for the government. We were making Jeep tires. And when I left, we were making Hummer tires for Iraq. We had government contracts, and I would have thought to get a government contract, you would have your feet held to the fire, so to speak, and follow all laws and guidelines. Equal pay law was passed in 1963. It's 50 years old this year, but I didn't get equal pay, and Goodyear had shortchanged me and a lot of other people. But after that jury came back on Friday afternoon in my trial, 2 women and 5 men, the verdict was we find in the plaintiff's favor $3.8 million. Judge U.W. Clement in Alabama, the first African-American judge in that state appointed by President Carter, he asked the jury to take a seat, and he explained to the courtroom that I was only entitled to $300,000. My $3 million suddenly dropped to $300,000. That's not right either. That needs to be changed as well. Also on back pay, a lot of people don't know this, but you can only go back 2 years. I don't care if you work 40 years, you can only go back 2. So the jury saw how much money I had lost through the years because my attorneys had it on a 4x8 white board. It was itemized, each individual. All that overtime, all of the retirements. And there was not a doubt in their mind how much money I had been cheated out of and would be cheated out of in my future retirements, because there's nothing in the law that allows you, once you get a verdict, to recoup any of your lost retirements. But the judge explained about the cap. My $3 million was $300,000 and 2 years back pay. But oh, how I loved those headlines. The headlines across the nation the next day in all of the papers. Jacksonville, Alabama woman awarded $3.8 million from Goodyear Tire and Rubber by federal court.